Welcome to the Unboxing the Office podcast, episode 4. Amazing. I can't wait to introduce you to today's guest because this is what it's all about. My friend, keynote speaker, communication strategist, and podcast host himself. We're going to talk about Wise Squirrels.
Yes.
Dave Delaney, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Of course.
Yeah.
Before we get started, a word from our sponsor today.
Yes.
Hot Logic, the alternative to the microwave in the corporate vending, in the corporate break room. Yes, we can break you free from the bondage of that infernal machine. There is an alternative. Back to the show. Dave, I'm excited to have you here. We're going to talk about corporate culture.
Yes. Let's do this.
We're going to do it.
Let's do this.
Before, as my audience knows, before we dig in, I always like to give our folks a chance to get to know our guests, because every day we're faced with challenges, and in our journeys, we have a chance to face any number of challenges along the way, and it's within the human condition to keep these things private, right? We don't often want to share. Of course, you've shared with me already. It's part of your story now.
Yeah, sure.
Are you willing to tell the story of the challenges that have guided your journey?
Sure. I'm an open book.
Yeah.
I've got lots of stories.
Please. The origin, I hesitate to say the origin story of Wise Squirrels, perhaps.
Yes, the podcast.
Is that how you arrived at that point?
For the podcast, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So this year marks 20 years of podcasting for me.
Wow.
Yeah. So I started podcasting in 2005, and have hosted multiple podcasts over the years. And yeah, so the story is that I was diagnosed with ADHD like 2 years ago. And so I did what every prolific content creator does, is I started a podcast about it, because that's what you do.
Of course.
And I started it because I wanted to share what I was learning about ADHD, because I wasn't really familiar. And also, as the podcast kind of started moving forward, I started growing an audience pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And in a great community. And one of the key things I've learned in the process of doing it is that with undiagnosed and untreated ADHD, your life expectancy can be up to 13 years less.
Wow.
And when I learned that, it sort of shifted this side project, passion project, to more of a mission, to help remove stigmas and educate people about ADHD. And so Wise Squirrels is my side project that I absolutely love doing. I love talking to high achievers like Dr. Bob Bradley, who was the former NASA International Space Station director for 16 years before being diagnosed with ADHD at 60. And then a lot of medical professionals who know a lot more than I do, obviously. So I'm kind of learning openly on the podcast, and I'm on track to probably have around 100,000 downloads this year. Probably more than that, actually, if it keeps going.
That's
the way
amazing.
It is. Yeah, so that's great. It only took me 20 years to find the right one.
You were only diagnosed 2 years ago. Did you have any sense, earlier indications that perhaps you were oblivious to, or what were the circumstances around this?
Yeah, so I'm married to a school teacher.
Right.
So she's been telling me I have ADHD for years, and I did the back in 2016. I actually did go and get a proper test. A couple tests actually with a psychiatrist or psychologist. I can't remember, but long story short, so I did, it was 2 sessions. I didn't get a diagnosis then.
Wow.
That I recall, at least. And so fast forward to a couple of years ago when a friend of mine pointed out that he thought I had ADHD. and that I should go and get tested, I thought, okay, well, yeah, maybe I will again. So I went to my doctor and he did some testing with me. And then he's like, yeah. And he said, wait a minute. And he fired up my chart and in the computer, and he's like, oh yeah, you were diagnosed in 2016 or something. So somehow I missed the memo, and I'm not still really sure how, but I also don't really care, because what's 5 years and 50 years, it's just.
Do you think they told you and you didn't want to hear it?
I honestly don't think that happened, because I would want to know. Even if I chose not to do anything about that, I would still want to know.
Sure.
So I don't really understand. There were some things that we covered that I recall. The biggest takeaway from those sessions really was not to share every crazy idea I have for a business with my wife until it is actually going to be a business.
Sure.
Because she's, God bless her, she's raised our 2 amazing kids as well, and has her own job and stresses and things. And so, in the past, I've shared every idea I have with her, and then she thinks it through and we discuss it. And then I'm like off to the next thing and forget that I even talked to her about it.
Sure.
And I don't do anything. So driving her crazy. So that was a good takeaway from that. And it's also perfectly in line with ADHD as well. So
once my wife has a chance to listen to this episode, she's going to tell me to go get tested. I can tell you that.
Well, there's a free there actually is a free assessment at wisesquirrels.com. So
yes.
I don't see the answers, but I included it there as a resource so people can take that online assessment and see the results. And again, I don't get any of that information and I don't see it. However, I always say, like with online, it is a proper online assessment,
right.
But with all, it's always best to talk to your doctor first.
Now, you were diagnosed 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So before your diagnosis, your business, you're a Jedi for hire.
Mm-hmm.
You travel around the country,
Mm-hmm.
helping folks to coaching folks on how to learn corporations, Google, large enterprises, Fortune 500, how to communicate, how
Yes.
teams communicate, the value of communication,
Mm-hmm.
right? And very successful in your own right before the diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And then, okay, here comes this diagnosis.
Yeah.
Did it change? I guess I should ask, did it change? Did it shift your focus in your work day to day?
It changed how I approach work and how just for my own mental health as well. One of the biggest takeaways, lessons I've learned is to give myself grace and to understand that I'm going to, run out of steam, or I'm going to hit walls, or I'm going to get distracted by something. And so all of these things, it's, I often use the analogy of because I've worked a lot in tech, and I'm nerdy that way too, thus, podcasting since 2005. The idea of the operating system, right? So Apple, Apple has a pretty superior operating system.
Yes, they do.
But Android has fair good devices too. And so I've always said that it was sort of like I was using an Apple iOS in an Android device, right? So some things were working,
right.
Some things weren't. It still looked good, but it would crash sometimes, or not everything, it would be a little buggy sometimes. And so I kind of use that analogy in sort of a playful way. And really ultimately it's about, for me, it's, I call it my neurotype is my operating system. And now
Sure.
that I know my operating system, I can
Sure.
adjust and course correct when need be. So
Knowing oneself. We're
Knowing
going to talk
oneself.
about that.
Yeah.
So I would pay money if you had a video, if you had recorded the day you came home and told your wife, dear, I'm here to tell you, you've been right all these years. I am a little ADHD, and I should have. What did that conversation?
Yeah.
What did that conversation look like? Are you willing to admit?
Yeah. Well, first of all, just the little ADHD is not accurate. Actually,
Okay.
it's either you have ADHD or you don't.
Okay.
There's
Sorry.
no little.
Sure.
There's no bit. So
It shows you how much I know.
No, and it's fair, and it's fair. And with social media, I mean, there's a lot of misinformation and incorrect information about ADHD that I've learned over the years. And that's one of the biggest ones where like a lot of people think that, everyone's a little ADHD sometimes, and that's not accurate at all.
Wow. Okay.
They could be forgetful, they could be distracted, but it doesn't mean they have ADHD. So telling my wife, it wasn't a big deal because she already knew.
She didn't do a dance?
No.
I could picture the TikTok of her standing up and saying, yes, I knew it.
No, because she would never be caught dead on TikTok.
Well, that's a fair point.
Thankfully.
Yes, that's a whole separate conversation. I don't know if we have time to really dive into that one, but that's great. I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah. But it's been great. And the feedback I continue to get on the podcast, through the coaching I'm doing, through I'm working on a special event for Wise Squirrels. And really the term Wise Squirrels came because wise for the wisdom that we've accrued through our careers, through our lives, getting to the point that we've gotten without knowing we had ADHD.
Sure.
And then squirrels because squirrel.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So wise, wisdom, squirrels. Squirrel.
But no, that was on Wise Squirrels, the podcast. Check it out on Spotify. There's the commercial.
Yeah.
That only came about after your diagnosis.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you've recently celebrated a milestone, 50 episodes.
Yes, 50 episodes. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
When I started it, one thing with ADHD in the past is I sometimes would bite off more than I could chew, and then I'd run out of steam on whatever, and that project would,
of course,
wither away. In podcasting, we call it pod fading.
Sure.
When somebody starts a gung-ho daily podcast, and then it's like, well, it's weekly, and then it's like, a couple times a month, and then it's like once a month, and then and then it kind of gradually kind of fades away.
You've been here before.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure, yeah. So starting the podcast has been just really a logical step.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah.
So you travel around the country teaching folks the value of communication. Mm-hmm. And now, do you incorporate your work, what you've learned through the podcast and such in your day-to-day work as a communication strategist?
Do I incorporate the podcast?
The work your lessons learned. Yeah. As you explore this whole arena, because I don't know how aware you were of how your life changes, right? Mm-hmm. Once you're able to know yourself.
Yeah.
Accept yourself.
Yeah.
Connect with yourself.
That's right. Yeah.
There's a book.
Yeah, I'm working on my next book right now called The Root Down.
Right.
And it's 3 sections, and I have a keynote presentation that I'm already doing that I've done a fair amount of already. But the idea is to know yourself, your strengths, your neurotype, perhaps your operating system, to know yourself, and then to respect yourself, and that includes self-love, self-acceptance, and then connecting yourself, which partly is to do with this loneliness epidemic that we're all going through. And so the idea there is to find ways to connect with community and things. So and the book itself is about the presentation is about my ADHD diagnosis, and it is partly about ADHD, but the process of the root down can be done by anyone, regardless of their neurotype, because the exercises and the steps that I include in the book and in the presentation and training that I do with this, it's applicable to anyone. So yeah.
Now as you suggested yesterday, the title of the book is reference to an 80s rock band. I don't know if you want to share.
Yeah, Beastie Boys. Yeah, so The Root Down is a song by the Beastie Boys. So it's partly, and I follow sort of The Root Down. It's actually I think the original is Jimmy Smith, I believe.
Of course.
Which they sampled, and they actually give a shout out to in the lyrics of the song.
How did that happen that you pick a Beastie Boys song for the title of a book?
Well, I mean, it's the Beastie Boys, so first of all.
For the audience, the Beastie Boys, late 80s, one of their title tracks, you got to fight for the right to party.
That's true. Yes, that was on their first album.
Excuse me.
That was on their first album, License to Ill.
So
and back in the 80s. Yeah.
challenging from a corporate perspective, perhaps.
Not really. I think, I mean, I don't really reference the Beastie Boys in the presentation or the training at all. It's just where I picked the name of the song from. Or the name of the book from. So I don't know. It's probably not really applicable.
I looked up the lyrics.
Yes.
Look at the lyrics.
Yes.
It looked classic Beastie Boys. Nothing particularly jumped out at me. But I love those references.
They're great.
As a Gen Xer,
Yes.
anytime we have a chance to relive our past, as we say, the good old days, the 80s and the 90s, I'm here for it.
Yes. It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've done a lot of thinking about that too, like about the past, and this is a dangerous spot for people who are late diagnosed adults with ADHD, which is what the podcast is for, who the podcast is for, specifically for late diagnosed adults. But one of the dangerous things is after getting diagnosed, you start to reflect on the past, and you start, perhaps regretting decisions you made or didn't make, and where your life went in one direction as opposed to another. Which can lead, there's a whole line of when you think too much of the past, that can lead to depression.
Sure.
And if you think too much of the future, that can lead to anxiety.
Right.
And so the idea is to be more present and in the now, because really that's the only time we can control.
Yes.
Right. And the past is really just stories we tell ourselves. Like if you and I experience the same thing anytime in the past,
right,
you have your own interpretation of it. And so do I. And perhaps the way you retell the story might be slightly different, probably would be than the way I do it. So I've been quite intrigued by, reflecting on the past in that way. But also, especially for fellow wise squirrels, I always, the point is to celebrate how far you've come.
Sure.
Regardless of where you are in your life. So, yeah. But the Beastie Boys, I mean, you're a great band. So
you shared with me, moving on from the Beastie Boys,
yes.
You shared with me a term I'd not heard before yesterday when we spoke, neurodiversity, and the importance of recognizing that in the enterprise. Again, as my audience knows, I'm all about corporate culture, health, and wellness. They are connected. But what does neurodiversity mean to your clients?
Well, I mean, neurodiversity is just the different neurotypes, the different operating systems that we have, right?
Right.
And so, I'm not an expert on this, and I should have prefaced that. Of course, I always say that on the podcast that I'm not a doctor,
but
nor do I play one
on TV,
or on the internet. Yes, I am not. So, and I'm not really well versed in autism and other neurotypes, really.
Sure.
I mean, what I know is what I've been hyper focused on over the last few years with the podcast, a couple of years, is to learn about ADHD. And so that's kind of what I've learned a lot about. But there are pretty smart companies, fledgling startups like, Microsoft, Google, IBM, and so on that have neurodiverse departments, and they specifically hire people depending on maybe their neurotype plays a role in that. Because they're better problem solvers. They're better at, and again, I mean, I'm generalizing and everybody's different. But certainly there's one of the advantages, and it can be a blessing and a curse with ADHD, is that you become hyper-focused on whatever project you're working on, assuming it's something of interest, right? And so if you're interested in a project, then, like, for example, I studied radio and television broadcasting. And so in television and video work, and audio too, like when you're editing, you can be editing you could forget to eat and be just in an editing bay, for hours and hours and hours. And suddenly it's like 8 hours later and you're like, holy crap, I haven't eaten today.
Yes.
So that's an advantage in work. Often this is something people strive for called flow, right? Which isn't a problem for ADHDers because we get hyper-focused on projects, on work that we enjoy doing. However, you can easily be distracted by trying something else in the process, and then you fall down that rabbit hole, and you got to bring yourself back. So I don't even remember what the question was. But.
Well, how's an organization that has teams, right, that they're depending upon to bring these projects, whatever the project might be, to fruition? How do they recognize the importance of that? Does everyone have the same operating system? Do people have different operating systems, and how do they work together?
Yeah, right. So, I mean, companies, as I said, like companies that are savvy and smart will hire people of different neurotypes and be educated enough to understand those differences. Because, and again, I'm not an expert in autism, certainly, or other neurotypes perhaps, but sometimes it can be more difficult to have a conversation with somebody if you're, somewhere on the spectrum. And so that makes job interviewing difficult, even though you're highly intelligent.
Right.
And intelligence has nothing to do, you could be a straight A student with ADHD, or you could fail with ADHD. It has nothing to do with intelligence. And so, so companies that understand that and those differences can then, hire appropriately or interview appropriately. And also, again, in work environments, depending on, if your company is together again in-house or even working in a hybrid model, when they do come together, it's important to, understand, you make what's called accommodations, right, for people based on their needs. So, if loud noises or bright lights bother people, which they can, then it's good to provide them with a workspace that's comfortable so that they can get the work done.
Are these issues you're able to talk about in your work, or do folks not want to hear it? Are they ready to hear this? Are they ready to have this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like part of what I do is I help companies improve communications internally to attract and retain talent. And I do that through coaching, executive coaching, but I also do it through, in-house, whether it's workshops, training, ongoing training, things like that. So it depends on what the company is looking for and what they need, right? So, for me, it's not a huge focus of what I do. However, it's definitely something that can come up and something that companies can, explore, figuring out ways that, and I can help them do that to accommodate for those folks. So, yeah.
Attracting and retaining talent.
Yeah.
That's
it's
something
expensive.
that, expensive to hire, expensive to lose.
Yeah.
But we still have a lot of turnover.
Yeah. So, I actually have like a free calculator. I call it my employee churn calculator.
Oh, nice.
It's at futureforth.com, my core business.
Futureforth.com.
That's right.
Founder and CEO,
yes.
Dave Delaney.
Guilty as charged.
There's the commercial.
But there's a sign up, or there's no email sign up or anything. It's not gated at all. So anybody can go and check it out. But the purpose of it is to crunch the numbers to see how much it will cost to replace, rehire, retrain, recruit a new employee when somebody leaves.
Sure.
And it's based off the Society for Human Resources Management's calculation that it costs between 6 to 9 months someone's salary to replace that person if they quit.
Wow.
So if you lose like a $60,000 employee, let's say, that costs between $30,000 to $45,000 to replace.
Wow.
And so you're better off not losing talent, because also if somebody quits who is maybe more popular or more seasoned or what have you, then what happens is what Adam Grant calls, employee, I'm losing it. It's turnover contagion.
Wow.
And so when one person quits, other people start to quit.
Yeah.
And that tends to happen anyway.
Yeah.
And so now you have to do that multiplication to start to figure out, oh my God, like you could have a mass exodus, and that's gonna be extremely costly. So the idea and the work that I do is help organizations and leaders improve culture, improve communications, so that they don't face that. And one of the key ways to do that is to address problems before they become major problems, or issues before they become major problems. And, so I have strategies and ways to do that.
What are the biggest issues you see today that organizations have specifically to culture, right, and communication? What's your top three? I would ask.
Well, because there's millennials and Gen Xers still in the mix, and others, different work ethics, different work styles, making sure that everybody's comfortable communicating with one another and doing so. A big part of communication is setting expectations up front and being super clear up front on in how you communicate, perhaps, right? So that when how someone communicates, they're, it's like my kids, like they don't use punctuation in text messages, right? It's or even capitalization. So my daughter schooled me on this not that long ago. She's 18, and she was
I'm sure more than once.
Oh yeah, Dad, every time you put a period in the text, I read that like an exclamation mark. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, what? And so that period becomes this like blunt thing.
So what does an exclamation mark mean?
No, you don't want to go there.
Dad.
So understanding different communication styles, setting expectations. And so different ages and dealing with that is an important first thing. Another one is just hybrid work models in general.
Return to work from home.
Work from home, return from work. Yeah. So if you have like a fully remote distributed team, and that's good for some businesses and needed for some businesses. Often when I'm coaching executives for companies like that or team members, either I'm doing a training virtually, or even better, I'm hired to come often to their like annual company retreat.
Right.
I was just in Montana,
nice,
doing that for a company there. So they had an annual employee gathering, offsite kind of deal. And I came and did like a keynote presentation about communication for them. And so, there's an opportunity there to, help teach teams how to communicate better, even when they're fully remote and distributed. Now, hybrid has its own issues as well, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially after the pandemic, when everybody was remote during that time, as companies started bringing people back in a hybrid model, they didn't communicate to the team members when the teams would be there or their department would be there. And so what happened was a lot of people were going back to work in an empty office with like 3 other people. And they're like, where is everybody? Yeah. And it was Wednesday, but everybody decided to come back on Thursday.
Yes.
And so again, communicating that is key for a hybrid business. I think hybrid, and then, obviously hybrid is, I think, best in most cases.
Sure.
As long as you're communicating and setting expectations as a leader when it's best, like how to best communicate to your team when they should be back, bums and seats in the office or not.
Yeah. Well, Dave, what you don't seem to understand is we all have these smartphones. And so therefore, the communication problem has been solved. Check the box. Dave, you're wasting your time. Yes. I don't understand. Why is communication a problem?
Yeah.
Tongue in cheek.
Yeah. Well, the phones are a big problem.
The phones are the problem.
The phones, the phones are a big part of the problem, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. I really do believe that, I've told my kids this, who are 18 and 19, that it may be in their lifetime. I would expect it probably will be, but certainly in the grandkids, once that happens, not too soon.
All grandchildren are a blessing no matter when they arrive.
Yes, not too soon. But I believe that when we look at photos of this generation later, the phones will be cigarettes.
Wow.
So every photo of you holding your phone will be the equivalent of the pictures of our past with our parents, or even us holding a pack of cigarettes and looking back at that going, oh my God, I can't believe we used to do that. I can't believe we used to smoke. It's not to say that the technology of smartphones isn't incredible, and the stuff that we can do with it, it's amazing. However, they're designed to be addictive. And if you're prone to addiction, which is also a fun bedfellow with ADHD, especially, and you're not aware of this, or if you're raised on a device because, the parents just give the kid an iPad so it'll shut up in a crowded restaurant or whatever, that's going to come back. And so addictive tech is definitely something that I'm quite passionate about. Also, as an early adopter in social media, I was on Twitter in February 2007, back when it was somewhere I would recommend. Now, not so much.
Yes.
But, I've been on LinkedIn for, I think, 13 years this year.
Yeah, wow.
And so I'm an early adopter in a lot of this stuff. But back then, it was before algorithms. It was before bots. It was before AI and all these things that have kind of, made these places rather toxic. And also, I think the days of social media are quickly coming to an end.
It'll be interesting to see where that goes. But AI,
Yes.
so of course, all in jest, AI will solve all these problems.
Yes.
Right. Our as I like to say, our tech doesn't seem to be improving, but rest assured, fear not. Here comes AI. I'm sure nothing can go wrong.
No.
Will AI solve these problems?
The line I've always I like, and I can't remember who said it first, but I stole it from somebody. But the line I always say when it pertains to AI is whoever invented the ship invented shipwrecks.
Sure. Yes. Yes.
So, yeah, their AI, I use it daily. I use it all the time. And it's great. But the problem is we don't have laws in place to protect us.
True.
And unfortunately, our elected officials are sleeping at the wheel on this. And that's what happened with social media.
Right.
Social media wasn't legislated. There wasn't rules of the game. The FTC came in with some stuff, but it's a little too late. Even smartphones should probably come with a warning of addiction, right, because they are addictive.
Warning label.
Yeah, 100%. And so now, now with AI, there's a lot of great things that AI will bring, but there's also a lot of threat.
We haven't, it's a fair point. We have not, as a culture, figured out what to do with social media. And now here comes AI. Mm-hmm. And a much larger challenge for the average, Fortune 500 CEO, right? With these forces of creative destruction bearing down upon them, and of course held accountable every quarter to Wall Street. What are they to do? When they ask you that question?
Yeah,
Dave, what do I do? How do you respond?
You learn how to use the technology before it uses you, right? That's the main thing. And that's what I advise my clients on is, again, as an early adopter and kind of a nerdy fella, I do love using AI for different applications and coding and things like that. But if people don't understand how to use it, it's the same thing that happened early days with the internet.
Yes.
I'm old enough to remember a time before the internet when I ran a BBS on my Commodore 64
My goodness.
Back in the 80s.
A bulletin board system.
Yes. So because companies ignored it, it was sort of the idea that, it might have been too confusing. So it's like, I don't want to hear about it. It's just a fad or whatever people would say, which they did.
Truth.
Companies and industries collapsed.
Yes.
We spoke recently about the Kodak camera. Right?
Yes.
Kodak is a great example of that. The company that had the means to tap into digital photography.
Yes.
And
they invented
failed miserably with it.
Yes.
So you have to, whether you love it or hate it, you have to embrace it and you have to understand it. like ships and shipping, right? Like, I mean, ships do wonderful things. You
Right.
go on a cruise, you can get all your goods shipped from wherever or ship them off to wherever.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of great things, but again, like the ships sink.
Yeah.
Right. That can happen.
Storms come along.
Titanic, whatever.
Yes.
So again, if you don't know what you're doing, that's going to cause problems. And a great example of that is how a lot of companies don't have policies in place, or they don't have protections in place or software in place, or they're just not aware of the threat of, your team members taking all your customers' healthcare data
Oh, yes.
and using ChatGPT to process it.
Yes.
Well, you're feeding ChatGPT
Are there any regulations
with
around that?
all of that. Now there's HIPAA, and there's things there, but I mean, the same can be said for like just any company that has an email list.
Right.
If you upload the email list to, Gemini or
Right.
whatever the AI of the day is, Perplexity, if you upload that email list, I mean, you don't know for sure if that email list is going to be safe.
Right.
Or whatever information you're sharing. There's already been suicides by kids who are building relationships with AI and
Yes.
then end up killing themselves.
Yeah.
And this stuff is happening. So
So speaking of emails,
Yes.
you are, of course, a subject matter expert in the area of email marketing and conferences and trade shows.
mhm.
So for organizations, right, trying to grow their enterprise,
Mhm.
those are channels that they can leverage
Yeah.
for their benefit. Conferences, trade shows. How is social media affecting those venues now? How will AI affect those channels in the future?
Yeah. So and what you're talking about there, thanks, is something I call 10x conference coaching, right? So I help companies who are going to go to a conference because it costs. And I have another free calculator of this. Again, no email gate, so you can just use it.
We'll put the links
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the podcast.
Yeah, I'm just mentioning it so people can check it out and use
Yes.
it if they want. But a future for it. But it will show you how much an event really does cost.
Sure.
Because you think, okay, I'm going to send 2 team members to work in a small booth
Right.
on the trade show
Yes.
floor.
Been there.
Yeah, and so you factor in the prices of the sponsorship and so on.
Yep.
But you fail to think about, whether they're entertaining people or whether there is, what the travel is going to include, what the
Right.
hotel is going to be. And so
And
I
the
have this
time.
calculator that kind of gives you the time, to the office or away. I'm a huge believer in the power of conferences.
Sure.
Yes, I'm a keynote speaker, so I do a lot of
Nice.
speaking
You're
at
not biased.
conferences. I'm not biased. But the most of the magic that happens at conferences happens in the hallways, right? It's the serendipity and the spontaneity that occurs during, these times. And so, and I have lots of conferences and trade shows and things that I still reflect really positively on. And I think these days, with social media going the way it is and living online so much, I think people are kind of clamoring to get together again in person. And for now, if you meet somebody at a trade show or a conference, they are most likely human. We haven't gotten that far yet, but Blade Runner perhaps will
Right.
be
Oh
coming.
my goodness.
But for now, at least, we're meeting real people, right? So there's a lot of value there. And so what I do is I help organizations plan what to do before, during, and after a conference or a trade show to make sure that they have a good plan and they see a return on their investment. So that if they spend, 1,000, 100,000, $1 million on the conference, they'll be able to measure and see the results and say, okay, yes, we made X dollars on this trade show. Yeah, it makes sense to go back next year. Or what most people do is they just go back without knowing whether, and it probably is, maybe they're not seeing a return on investment. So part of what I do is give ideas there. And I've exhibited at CES and spoken and networked like crazy at conferences, tons of conferences. And when I was speaking for Google, I would travel on Google's behalf and speak and deliver presentations on Google's behalf, but I'd be representing Google,
Sure.
right? So again, it's all about building genuine relationships You know, that's what my first book, New Business Networking, is all about.
Wait, there's another book?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the first one.
New Business Networking.
Which I wrote with undiagnosed ADHD, which is a miracle that actually happened.
And you wrote it without AI?
Yeah, it was before AI.
When was this published?
2013, 2014.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's published by by Pearson Publishing.
New Business Networking?
New Business Networking. But, you know, you asked about like social media, right? With conferences. And I just, the way I see social media going is I don't think people will be using it much in the near future, because with the exception of personal, like for example, like a Facebook profile, not a page, but a Facebook profile. If you are connected with genuine friends there, then you will probably continue to use that because you know those people. LinkedIn is another good example where, you know, presumably you're connecting with people that know you and you know, hopefully, that's what I always advise. Then if you know these people, then that's different. But with social media, what was great about it back in the day was that you would meet people. I would meet all sorts of people on Twitter, for example, or you know, Jaiku or Plurk, or, you know, all these others.
You're making those up.
Pounce.
Those are real?
Yeah, these ones that were around, back in the day.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, they were all Twitter competitors. But it was great back then. You would meet people on Twitter. You may not even know their real name. And then I used to host tweet ups. So I would travel to conferences and I would host a tweet up, and they were like Twitter meetups, and your Twitter friends would come. I used to host them at South by Southwest every year.
But physical meetings.
Yeah. But with your Twitter friends.
Right.
And so a lot of the time, what the magic that would happen there is the relationships would become more real because there'd be physical touch.
Yes.
High fives, handshakes, hugs. And that's when the magic happened, because then these relationships that started online became real in a way because you're meeting, you know, IRL in real life. And so, but the way things are going now is I wouldn't even waste your time on most social networks now, because there is a high likeliness that you're speaking to a bot.
Right.
And you won't even know.
Yes. And the algorithm is playing you anyway. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it's just not even, I don't think it's worth it anymore.
I have clients who have told me that part of this, speaking of recruiting and retaining the best talent, they've interjected segments of the interview process for the specific purpose of confirming that the interviewee is not a bot.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's happening a lot. Yeah. That's happening a lot.
What?
No, that is happening a lot, where I've spoken to like VPs of HR and HR directors and CEOs and others about the challenges now, because the HR department is using AI to write the job description, and they're using AI to post it. And then the AI behind, or, you know, or even just the code behind whatever job site it is, only surfaces candidates based on the keywords they're using.
Yep.
And so, and the candidates are writing cover letters and updating their resumes based on using AI.
Yes.
So it's really already, in a way, like bots talking to bots. And so you're kind of missing that human element, and you're missing out on like recruiting legit awesome candidates because you're not even seeing them surface.
Right.
Or they're not even seeing your job listed.
Is that going to get worse before it gets better?
100%. Yeah, it's going to get a lot worse, because this is still early days.
Right.
I mean, you know, the thing with AI, I mean, just because something I've learned over the years is that when you live in a fishbowl, let's say you are a digital marketing person and you live in that fishbowl and you communicate with other digital marketing people, and then the stuff that you're talking about, you just assume everybody knows. But then you go out to the grocery store or wherever, and they don't know anything you're talking about. Right. And the same can be said for other industries.
Yes.
Because I speak about communication, I get invited to speak at an array of different industries and conferences and companies and associations that are about topics I do some research, but I don't claim to be an expert in, you know, concrete. Right.
Sure.
But I also, if I was in a room with a bunch of concrete CEOs, talking about construction and concrete, I wouldn't have a clue what they're talking about. Right. But again, if they step out, they're like, oh, wait a second, the world doesn't know about concrete. Right. So, yeah.
So how you paint a picture, social media and AI and bots talking to bots, yet for an enterprise to succeed, you need good people.
You need great people.
You need great people.
Yeah.
In the course of the next, and it's difficult to make predictions. You know, a lot of organizations don't do annual planning anymore because things just move too fast. Mm. What do you see happening in the next 5 years?
I think hybrid is likely here to stay, and probably for the better.
Sure.
I think. See, it's kind of a misunderstanding that people think that like young people don't want to work. They don't want to go to the office. And I think young people, especially as they get older, are realizing, oh, I don't also want to just sit at home alone all day.
Yes.
Right. I believe the power is in proximity. And that's the future. It's going to be about seeing people in person. And again, if you're, as I mentioned, if your team is distributed or remote or even hybrid in some cases, you still have to bring them together at once or twice a year, at least, depending on where they are. And this is why, like, I often speak at conferences or at these types of retreats or team building exercises, all that stuff that I do, because if you work behind a computer all day and you do the work and you have no affinity to that brand, that company, because some other recruiter then calls you and says, hey, we want you to do the same thing you're doing now for the company's competitor or some, but we'll pay you double.
Right.
And you don't really know the people you work with. You don't really have any relationships there. So you're like, sure. All right. And you quit and you go to the next place. So for companies that don't invest in ways like an internal conference or a retreat or something where they don't bring their team members together ever, they're not going to last.
Wow.
Definitely not going to last. And so you really do need to invest in those relationships and growing those relationships. And that's a big part of what I do. And big thing that I'm passionate about is whether it's through different Strengths Finder, different personality assessments, strengths assessments, and things like that. Even though those are unscientific, they still help you kind of recognize your strengths and communicate and learn the way you communicate. I have my own ones that I've come up with too, that I will work with teams to help build relationships internally so that they don't leave. Everybody leaves eventually, and 10 years not what it used to be. No. I mean, you don't get the Rolex and, up the corporate ladder. That just doesn't exist anymore for the most part. Most industries, not all, but most industries. So, churn is going to happen, but the better environment you provide for your team members, the better it's going to be long-term, and the less stress and cost there's going to be in replacing them when they quit. Right. And leave reviews of your business on Glassdoor or Yelp or wherever, or Indeed, not Yelp. So there's a lot of need to invest in your people. You talk about like these challenges and things. There's a Friends episode, dating the reference.
Here we go again. Back to the 80s or 90s.
90s. Yeah. And I don't remember any of the plots of Friends, and I wasn't even.
There wasn't much of a plot.
I wasn't really like a fan or anything. But I do remember one episode that always resonated with me, and I wrote a blog post about it, called "Smoking with the Boss." And the premise was that Rachel, there was a new woman working with Rachel who was junior to her, but was like quickly skyrocketed, getting all the best jobs. And the boss really loved her. Yeah. And suddenly Rachel's getting jealous. And then Rachel realizes that the reason why it was happening is because the boss and the new person smoked. And they would go out on cigarette breaks together and chit chat, right? It was like the water cooler in a way. And so Rachel pretended she smoked and went out and like choked, coughing up a lung.
I don't think I saw that episode.
It was a great premise too. But I think about that, how it pertains to these days, again, where, that serendipity, that stuff doesn't happen without bringing without your team working together. And I think also, there's studies in friendship and relationships that often occur with people that you meet at work,
right?
Because you spend so much of your time
Yes.
there and with those folks. And so you're less likely to quit if you like the people you work with, right?
There's power in proximity. I'm going to use that. That's good.
You can use it as a hashtag, but it won't help.
Right. Yeah. What does a hashtag do anymore? Eh?
Yeah.
I still use them, but that's just because I'm old.
Yeah, I remember Christmas. I wrote about it in the book. That's how old my book is.
Yeah.
It was Chris Messina that invented the hashtag on Twitter as a way for us to track our conversations, because there was no way to do that. But I digress.
So in HR's challenge, every enterprise is challenged with AI, the technology, and we have bots talking to bots. Yet, as you point out, and a friend of mine just recently recommended the Enneagram personality test, so I'm going to take that one.
Yep.
That stuff is fun.
Yeah.
But how do you recruit and retain the best when you're hiding behind these technologies? You don't even get to shake hands with someone until the 9th interview after they're hired, month 2. As you suggest, it'll get worse before it gets better. Are there any organizations that have cracked the code on this?
I think, well, even to your point about not shaking hands till the 9th interview, I mean, whose fault is that?
Right.
Is that the candidate's fault? They're there. They have hands.
Sure.
They want to shake them.
Yes.
Right. So it's not the candidate's fault.
Right.
That's maybe management, way above, just waiting. Just give me someone.
Right.
Right. So maybe that problem's on the other side.
Right.
In the leadership. And I think the better way that you can do it is, and again, I mean, it's different strokes for different folks. It depends on the organization and the size of the organization. I mean, I've worked for small, like mom and pop shops, all the way up to, doing workshops for Google, for example. I think I can't remember what the question was now. What was the question?
What organizations, I don't know if you can name any, or if you would name any, have cracked the code on this? Who's doing it right?
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult to say. I mean, I've worked with companies in the past that have really done interesting, cool things, right? So one company, so I have a talk I do called Radical Retention, nice. One of the presentations I do in training. And this company, there's an organization called kiva.org, and you can basically buy a like a gift card kind of thing. You can put like, say, $25 credit on it. And then what you do is it's a microloaning site, right? So you go on the site and you find entrepreneurs around the world who need funding for their startups. And it could be a woman in Uganda with a jewelry business who needs money for new jewelry to create, or a farm somewhere, or whatever it is, women-led businesses, different things like that, and those funds. What's cool about it is that, like, if you do $25, that goes a long way, 25 US in a different currency.
Yes.
But what's cool about it is it's a microloan. So these entrepreneurs gradually pay you back. And as you get paid back, the money, you get an email alert after a certain amount of time that tells you, hey, so-and-so or these people have paid you back, and now you have credit in your account. So you can then redistribute that. I say this because this is a great example where a company that I know and love used Kiva, and they put each department had their own. It was a small business. Each department, like maybe 50 people, 60 people. Each department had their own Kiva account.
Sure.
And the team would decide how to distribute those funds as they came back in.
Wow.
I have probably $400 or $500 in Kiva I've had for, 15 years that I just redistribute as it comes back in. So it's just an example of a way that you can do good to give back to the world, to help people, but also do so in a way that brings your team together. because they get to decide who gets the funds, which loans to send
Sure.
out. So that's just like one example of a way to do that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways, and it just depends again on the budget, the size of the company, the challenges they're facing. And this is what I help companies with, is help determine like best practices, or not just best practices, but the best way to
Sure.
improve their culture.
Right.
But not just the culture, also, the relationships in house, so that, yeah, people know, like, and trust one another, and
Right.
they get along better and they get more done, but they also enjoy work because, that's
Right.
what it comes down to. As I think I mentioned to you before, like, I've worked in cubicle hell, right? I've worked for bad bosses, and I know what that's like. So
I don't
I
know,
feel good
Dave,
about it.
I gotta say, slow your roll there, my friend. You're talking about trust. You're talking about enjoying work. This is madness, I tell you.
I know,
Madness.
I know.
Is this possible?
I encourage business owners to look up their businesses on, Glassdoor is still the main place, and see how their team members are doing. And
It's something we haven't brushed on yet. We live in an instantly public world.
Mm-hmm.
And transparency is a thing. Whether you want it or not, folks are talking about you.
Mm-hmm.
Online, Glassdoor, Indeed, right? The brands are not just built, they're revealed, as I like to say.
Yeah.
So be careful what you wish for. But Kiva, what a remarkable example of technology that can be leveraged for good.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots. I mean, one client that I used to, that I worked with, they ended up starting a back to school program, and they would get, they did it through an organization, but they bought all the supplies, and then their team members filled all these backpacks for underprivileged kids and then they got to distribute those backpacks.
Right.
So again, you're taking your team off their computers or whatever they're doing to come together in the lounge or the kitchen or whatever area, boardroom, to work together and fill these backpacks.
Right.
And then they get to see like the results of that. And
Wow.
again, it's a way, you're not doing it because you want good PR, although that might come as a result.
Sure.
But it's the same thing with what I talk about with networking, is that it's a two-way street, and that with networking, you're building relationships and you're finding ways to serve others before asking for anything in return, and maybe not asking for anything in return.
Right.
Right. And so it's like karma, planting the seeds kind of deal, right? Like you're putting the good out there. And again, your team members, if they're doing good like that, then they're going to feel good about work, about coming to work, about their colleagues, getting to know them better. And then, and you're helping your community. So that all is a good reason not to quit.
And it's expensive when they do.
And it's expensive when they do.
Well, we've covered, of course, recruiting and retention. We've covered conferences, trade shows. We've talked about neurodiversity, which is my favorite subject of these. The book, The Root Down.
Yeah.
When's that going to be published?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still
it's
in
still early.
progress.
It's still early. I might self-publish it. My last book was published traditionally. And, I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to publish it or self-publish it. So we'll see.
Keep us surprised.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see it.
Yeah. I'll let you
What
know.
we missed? Did we miss anything?
I mean, there's always things.
I like my favorite pull quote is this: power in proximity. That's even better than know your operating system.
Mm-hmm.
Was it know your operating system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Extraordinary.
Yeah. I mean, I really do believe that, like, the future is in person, because, and I think we're getting to that point. I think my kids are even starting to get a little tired, especially my son, but my daughter to an extent are getting tired of smartphones and of constant texting and TikTok or Snapchat or whatever. Like, and
Yes.
I mean, I've educated them as best as I can and schooled them as best as I can on the dangers there, right? And there are legitimate dangers with addictive technology, especially in the hands of children.
Yes.
And so I think kids are getting older and realizing, we live in sort of this polarized world, and really at the end of the day, everybody has, generally speaking, but most people have the same fears, the same, wants, needs, like, you just, and when if you just sit in front of a screen all the time, it's just going to feed you stuff to get you upset. If it bleeds, it leads. Right?
The algorithms,
and not just the algorithms, but the networks too.
Yes.
I mean, you turn on TV, you turn on talk radio, you turn on podcasts. Everything is so
toxic,
polarizing.
Yes.
And that's where the money is.
It's a game of let's you and him fight.
Right, exactly. And then the fat cat sits back and cashes checks while everybody else is fighting in the streets.
Yes.
And it's just, if you got out of your house and away from your screen and actually met people, like when I lived in Ireland for a couple of years, and, pub life.
Right.
I mean, pubs, the word pub comes from public house.
Yes.
Right. And so pubs were, and are still, a place where people would come together, and it didn't really matter what your background was or is.
Wait, are you telling me a public house is not where you go to drink beer?
Oh, that's what brings people together. Yeah.
But the point is to come together.
The point is to come together. Yeah. And I think we're all kind of craving that. That's that loneliness factor and the connect yourself portion of the root down, which is, it's the loneliness epidemic, according to, it was Vivek Murthy, the former Surgeon General, who said, and I think he got it from a different study, but he wrote a book about loneliness, and he was talking about how the health effects of loneliness are the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
15.
Yeah, because with loneliness, and call it what you want, or solid, like just being by yourself all the time, you don't get exercise, you don't socialize, like really socialize with humans, like
eating habits go downhill.
You eat like crap, maybe drink, whatever. But these things all add up, and and then over time you develop diseases and all the things. And I know one of your other guests, you guys talked about healthcare and stuff, and that was a big shock move into the U.S. from Canada originally. I asked my buddy, I said, who's your GP? And he's like, what do you mean?
Right.
And I said, your doctor. Like, who's your doctor? And he's like, my pediatrician, like for the kids.
Right.
I'm like, no, you. Like, who is your doctor? And he's like, I don't have a doctor. I just go if I'm sick.
Yeah.
And I said, but you take your car in for an oil change and tune-up.
It's sick care.
Yeah. I'm like, you take your car in to check.
Yes.
He's like, well, yeah. And then after I got my GP, he got the same GP.
Yeah.
So it does have ramifications. So I think coming together and meeting people in person is important. And same with teams, same with companies.
Yeah. Well, I agree. Gen Z, Gen Alpha is coming around. They saw what the generations previous to them had done, and they're not having it. So I believe the pendulum is swinging back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And a great place to wrap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can tell you, on behalf of the Unboxing the Office podcast, Dave Delaney, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Before we go, how do folks find out more about the work you do?
If you go to futurefourth.com, that's the business. That's where you'll find me. Or if you just Google Dave Delaney, I'll come up. So say hello.
It's great. Thank you to our sponsor, HotLogic, for this episode, the alternative to the microwave. There's power in proximity. We might work that into their advertising. Who knows? But
they can cut me a check.
Right? Yes. We'll talk royalties. Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
It's been awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.